Hello and welcome. I'm glad to see you guys all here. My name is Jen Marker. I'm a functional nutrition coach. I also do personal training. I have been a personal trainer for probably upwards of 15 years now, a nutrition coach for over 6 now. I got into nutrition coaching because I personally was having issues. I would say I came from, as most people, I definitely read the magazines and saw the people on the covers that were, toting how they got their beach body, eating 1,200 calories a day, and, thinking that that was what I needed to do. I remember when I was younger doing like the slim fast, like 2 shakes a day and 1 meal, and doing all the cardio and thinking that I needed to do more, and I needed to do cardio. And I had instances where I did the binging and the purging and using laxatives and punishing myself for meals by doing more exercise. And I got to a place where I was competitive in CrossFit and thinking I needed to do more to get better. And I was not eating to fuel that goal. And here I was doing all this work and I was gaining weight and I was holding on to body fat. And, I was doing 2 days, I was doing cardio, I was doing extra workouts, and my body was broken. And I got to this place where I was like, I need to do something different. And I hired a nutrition coach, and he was like, you need to eat more food, you need to eat more carbs, you need to eat more fats. And I did it. And I
Hmm.
got leaner, and I got down to like 7, 8% body fat. And during that time, I was on birth control and I wasn't getting a period. And as I saw all these improvements from actually eating and fueling my workouts, and feeling better, I was like, oh my gosh, there are so many people out there that read the magazines at the checkouts and think that they need to consume 1,200 calories. And as a personal trainer at the time, I had given people 1,200 calorie meal plans. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to be a part of the problem. I want to be a part of the solution. And I want to teach people that they need to fuel their bodies and learn to listen to the messages that their body's giving them about what they need. So as I moved through nutrition coaching, level 1 nutrition coaching, like level 2 hormone specialist, mindset specialist, I started working with a mentorship coach. And at that time, I didn't have a period. And she was like, hey, that's a problem. Like, we need to work on getting that back because that is a sign of health. That is essentially what they've kind of named the fifth vital sign for women. So understanding what your period, what your cycle should look like can give you a lot of insight into what stressors or what internal inflammation your body might be experiencing. So we did some nutritional modifications, some supplementation, and I got my period back. And I was like, oh, yay, awesome, yay, I get to bleed every month, right? So in doing so, though, I started to notice changes throughout my cycle. I started to notice improvements in performance and decreases in performance and cravings that naturally kind of pushed me towards different foods. So I started with the nutrition knowledge that I had about the messages that your body sends you when it needs certain things. Like if you're craving salts, like that might be more of an adrenal related craving. So you might be experiencing stressors. Craving more carbs or sugars could have to do with overall underconsumption of calories, or maybe you're just sitting in a high stress environment. So understanding that and where kind of my drives were for certain foods during different times of my cycle led me to develop coaches programs and client programs that basically worked to support hormones throughout the cycle. Now, yes, you got a question.
Okay. I know I don't know if you're going to be talking about this. What if you don't have a cycle anymore? What if you're
That's
going
exactly what
through
I'm
the
talking about
menopause
today.
and
That is
okay. All
exactly what
right.
we're talking about today. That is going to be what we talk about. We are going to talk about perimenopause, that perimenopause transition, and what menopause looks like. I'm now getting to my 40s, and I know that these are things that I need to be paying attention to. And that is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how your hormones adjust during perimenopause and that transition to menopause, what you need to be aware of in that transition, because we can't just keep pushing, because like those hormones, I mean, I hate to tell you the ending before we even get to the start, but those
I'm at the
hormones,
end, so
yes, those
I'm already there.
hormones are our stress buffers. So as they start to fall and we start to push harder, like our body responds in the opposite way. So I'll go into all the details as to why that occurs, but as we kind of move through this, just know that estrogen and progesterone, those are our stress buffers. So as we kind of move through this, we need to understand where stressors are coming in, and they're not all just like what we think, like I had an argument. Like I'm talking about internal stressors. I'm talking about things that trigger internal inflammation, and that could include things like gut issues, blood sugar regulation, because that is one of the things that estrogen and progesterone help to control. So we need to understand that so that we can manage it with our food, exercise, and activity to decrease that inflammatory response that our body kicks up because of it. So, yes, we are going to get to all of that. But, as far as things that I've done in my past to kind of get where we are today, coaches programs, client programs, I do one-on-one coaching, I do some group coaching, and I've gotten into a lot of functional nutrition. So dealing with gut related issues, dealing with things like PCOS, endometriosis, Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's is something, it's a thyroid condition, and it's something that women like 30 to 50 years old generally experience. And a lot of it has to do with stress and inflammation. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about, I don't want to say the basics because I have a tendency to want to let you guys know about everything. So I'll probably dive into some deeper things, but I'm going to kind of give you guys a general idea of things to look for, things to start to cue into in regards to the messages that your body is sending you. So I have a presentation for you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and get rolling into that presentation. Please feel free to interrupt me. You can use the hand up if you need to. I'll probably just be watching the presentation screen. So unmute, put something in the chat, or I'll try and make some intermittent breaks to ask questions.
Sorry
Yes.
for all these questions. I probably didn't look into this, or you probably had talked about it, but how long is the presentation and how long is your the Zoom call, the podcast?
My intention is to get you guys done in an hour.
Okay, I may be jumping off because I have another meeting.
No
So
worries. If you want the recording, I can send you the recording. So just
okay,
shoot me an email and I'll send you the
then
recording.
yeah, then I can reach out to you personally for stuff, right? Okay,
Perfect.
good. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So understanding menopause and the perimenopause transition. So first I want to kind of touch on the hormones that we have in a normal cycle. So for the first half of your cycle, so the follicular phase is day 1 through 14, luteal phase is day 14 or 15 through 28. So this is assuming a 28-day cycle. So we have estrogen that rises during the first half of the cycle. It peaks at ovulation, drops off, has a lesser rise during the second half of the cycle. Progesterone starts to rise at ovulation, so it is kicked off due to the egg releasing from the follicle and the breakdown of the corpus luteum, which causes progesterone to rise. Oh, I got a question. Okay, yes, I'll send you the recording. So we've got progesterone that gets kicked off due to ovulation. So if someone is not ovulating, they aren't producing progesterone. So when a woman is on birth control pills, that actually flatlines a woman's natural hormones and actually basically creates a cycle with synthetic hormones. So progestin is generally the progesterone synthetic hormone used and has some of the opposite effects that progesterone has, but we're not going to touch on that. During the cycle, right before ovulation, we see a slight bump of testosterone, and then it kind of tapers off. So that bump of testosterone is great for increasing libido. Now, the lowest point here is at the end of the cycle. That's when a woman's period begins. All right. So just so we understand kind of the nature of estrogen. So estrogen is primarily produced in the ovaries, but also produced by fat cells and the adrenals. It is an integral part of the endocrine system. So the endocrine system produces hormones that regulate metabolism, growth and development, tissue function, sexual function, reproduction, sleep, mood, as well as many other things. During the follicular phase, estrogen rises and peaks at ovulation. Estrogen is like a woman's superwoman hormone. So increasing levels of estrogen during the follicular phase are associated with increased release of feel-good hormones, serotonin and dopamine. It also helps to reduce inflammation and create more glowing skin, or there's a higher rate of cell turnover in the skin. So during the follicular phase, you might feel like your skin is a little bit more radiant or glowing. Estrogen in the follicular phase gives us higher energy, better mood, better recovery, and better blood sugar stability. So estrogen boosts mood, supports lubrication, protects the heart, supports muscles, protects the brain, and strengthens the bones. So some symptoms associated with lower estrogen, which is what we see as perimenopause begins, are going to be things like irregular periods, hot flashes, sleep problems, mood changes, vaginal and bladder problems, decreasing fertility, changes in sexual function, loss of bone mass or density, and changes in cholesterol levels. Now, progesterone. Progesterone is mainly produced due to ovulation during ovulatory years, and then lesser amounts by the adrenal glands. Without ovulation, a woman basically doesn't get progesterone. So during menopause, the adrenals become the main producers of progesterone. Healthy levels of progesterone act as a natural antidepressant, contribute to a restful night's sleep, and allow the body to use fat as energy sources. Progesterone is a precursor to GABA, which produces a calming effect on the brain. This can help with feelings of anxiety, stress, and fear. Progesterone counters estrogen, so where estrogen brought up serotonin and dopamine levels, progesterone will bring it down during that drop off during that last week in the cycle. So progesterone has a calming effect on the brain. It boosts the thyroid, reduces anxiety, supports sleep, minimizes PMS, and supports fertility. So a couple things in regards to estrogen and progesterone and how they, or what they do in the cycle. So estrogen essentially establishes the lining during those first 14 days, and then progesterone thickens it. So basically, progesterone comes in and says, estrogen, you've done enough. Now it's my turn to thicken the lining. So things that we might see if ovulation stops or becomes intermittent, maybe things like heavier cycles, because progesterone isn't there to kind of tell estrogen, hey, you've done enough. Now you need to stop. So symptoms associated with the drop off of progesterone. So this is where we see sleep problems start to occur, more anxiety, less patience, less calm, less resilience, and heavier periods. All right, then we've got our testosterone. So testosterone generally gets that little bump with the intention of fertilizing an egg due to ovulation. So if ovulation stops or becomes intermittent, then we may not see that same bump occur. So mid-cycle, women see a slight boost in testosterone right before ovulation, which causes an increase in sex drive to improve the likelihood of the fertilization of the egg that's dropped. Testosterone in combination with estrogen creates a great environment for muscle growth and a higher level of competitiveness. Testosterone naturally gets a slight boost during and after workouts. So that is one thing that I'm going to say right now. Strength training, natural testosterone. So if we do find that we're seeing it drop off in other places, like there are things that you can do within your lifestyle to naturally boost testosterone. So using strength training is a great way to boost testosterone levels naturally. Aerobics or prolonged periods of moderate cardio type exercise, so sitting on the treadmill for like hours at a time, have actually been shown to have negative effects on testosterone. So you do not need to spend hours on the treadmill. You're better off walking or using short intervals and strength training. All right. So understanding the perimenopause transition. So perimenopause can begin anywhere from 2 to 10, 12 years before menopause actually starts. So during this time, the ovaries will gradually produce less and less estrogen. Usually starts in a woman's 40s, but can start in a woman's 30s as well. Perimenopause basically lasts up until menopause. And menopause is the point when ovaries stop releasing eggs and ovulation no longer occurs. So what does menopause mean? So menopause means the ceasing of menstruation. After menopause, the ovaries produce less progesterone and estrogen. What considerations do we need to think about? So the brain ovary axis, or the OAT axis, the ovaries, adrenals, and the thyroid, need to be taken into consideration. So the OAT axis is essentially a three-legged stool. So if you think about the ovaries, the adrenals, and the thyroid, if the ovaries start to have issues, then we may see issues in the adrenals and or the thyroid. Because if we take one leg out of a three-legged stool, then it's going to fall over potentially. So understanding that cortisol is produced in the adrenals, we can anticipate that we need to take some sort of, I guess, like, what am I looking for? Personal responsibility for stressors that we are encountering. We can't continue to burn the candle at both ends as this is occurring. Now, thyroid, so you have basically your TSH, your thyroid stimulating hormone, your T3, which is your metabolic thyroid, and your T4, which converts to T3. So if there's high levels of inflammation and stress going on in your environment, then that could be a reason why the thyroid might start to downregulate. So we want to make sure that we're taking into account what is our thyroid experiencing as well. Like, why might our thyroid change? So adrenals, thyroid, ovaries, three-legged stool. When these signals start to fade, the brain tells the ovaries to make less and less progesterone and estrogen. As this starts, we call it perimenopause. And as it advances and periods completely cease, we call it menopause. When estrogen deficiencies occur in menopause, luteinizing hormone rises greatly. This is in order to try to tell the ovaries to make more estrogen, but the communication signal is no longer there, so LH stays elevated. So this is something that if you are wondering whether or not you're in menopause, if you get lab work done and your LH is high, and then in this next statement, later the follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, rises and stays elevated as for life as well in response to lower sex hormones. So if you were wondering whether or not you were in menopause, say maybe you had a hysterectomy or you haven't had a period for a long time, or there's some sort of medical reason as to why you haven't seen a cycle, you could go get lab work done. And if your LH and FSH are high and your estrogen and progesterone are in menopausal levels, then that's telling you that you're already in menopause.
So I have a question.
Yep.
So I did all my blood work and it came back that I'm in
Menopause?
no, the premenopause,
The perimenopause.
perimenopause. Yeah.
Mhm.
So pretty much what I should start seeing, and I just turned 50 a couple weeks ago. So should my next stages would be is starting to see that my period is starting to, like, in the next year, kind of taper off.
So it really depends. So as I said, perimenopause could be anywhere from 2 years to 12 years before you
Mm,
actually 100% transition into menopause.
Gotcha.
So it's, yeah, it's hard to tell where, that kind of end date is, unfortunately.
But once I get closer to menopause, then I'll know that it's, I mean, as my period's starting to taper off, that would, because I'm like literally since I've been 14, I get it every single month, right around the same exact time. I've had it for, I'm 50 now. So, I mean, I've never been on birth control and always been consistent. So if I start seeing changes in my period, then that's when I should really know that I'm gonna be really hitting the night sweats and all that stuff soon.
Potentially. And the thing is, like, everybody's body is a little different. And there are supplements that, we can add in that can support estrogen balancing. So things like DIM or like calcium D-glucarate are helpful for balancing estrogen. I have a lot of clients use seed cycling. And if they have an irregular cycle, I'll have them go with the moon cycle. So basically, seed cycling is actually using seeds, so flaxseed and pumpkin seed during the first 14 days, and then sesame seed and sunflower seed during the second 14 days to essentially help support estrogen during the first half and progesterone during the second half. Now, if someone doesn't have a cycle, then they can just continue to use the moon cycle and
Okay.
support any estrogen or progesterone that they're essentially getting from the adrenal glands at that point in time. And then in regards to if someone wanted to do hormone replacement therapy, like that's an option as well. Like I think that everybody should understand what that's doing, but understand that, everybody's decision should be based off an informed decision.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of the symptoms like sleeping, like less patient, like I've already started that over the last year. Like
Mhm.
I have horrible sleep patterns and everything.
Mhm.
So, I went and got tested but, I don't know how long I've been in perimenopause from the time that, I got my blood work a year ago. I could have, like you were saying, 2 to 10 years, like I could have been in it for the last 4 years
You could, exactly.
and I didn't know.
And there's things that you can do with nutrition and, like things that I'll talk about a little bit later in this presentation that you'll find that even if you are in perimenopause, like just because those are common symptoms
Mhm.
doesn't mean they have to be your symptoms.
Gotcha.
Like same thing with, women just assuming that they're going to have a painful, crampy period. Like I've done enough with my nutrition and like matching my nutrition and my activity with my cycle that my period just shows up now. Like I
Mhm.
see very minimal weight changes, like maybe a pound at most two. Like I have minimal weight changes. I see minimal cramping and pain. I might feel a little bit tireder and maybe a little bit more hungry the days leading up to it, but really it's only maybe 1 or 2 days. And
Mm.
it's like, oh, I wake up and I'm like, oh, there it is. And it's not problematic like women are led to believe it needs to be. It's
Yeah.
actually just it's another day that I'm
Yeah.
getting.
Yeah, I have excruciating periods. Like
Okay,
I don't leave the bed for one day every month,
got it.
you So, I mean, not like I want hot flashes, but I like, I don't want the cramps either. So,
Yeah. So, just a little note on cramps. So cramps can be worsened by higher levels of inflammation in the body. So prostaglandins are what are basically help contract the uterus to expel the lining. So when there's higher amounts of inflammation, whether it's coming from food, activity, like lifestyle, if there's higher amounts of inflammation present, that will cause a higher amount of presence of prostaglandins. So if you are experiencing painful, like crampy periods like that, we may want to dive into where your body might be experiencing inflammatory responses from. So if it's like a food thing, if it's a lifestyle thing, if it's sleep, like a circadian rhythm thing, because there's lots of sources of inflammation that could be actually worsening that. So
Okay.
yeah, so we can talk more about that another time.
Okay.
Like reach out for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What we need to take into consideration with perimenopause and menopause. So the body may be less efficient without the benefits of estrogen and progesterone. The body is less equipped to handle high stress and manage high cortisol. There's a higher likelihood of potential adrenal dysfunction. You may start to get night sweats. Libido may likely start to fall. Midsection weight gain increases. Symptoms of estrogen dominance become more apparent. Testosterone will likely be lower. Thyroid may be downregulated. More issues with insulin sensitivity begin to arise. You may not sleep well due to low progesterone. So progesterone helps to regulate glutamate in the brain. When progesterone falls, glutamate spikes, and this causes excitement, anxiety, restlessness, and restlessness to occur. All right, so there's phases of perimenopause. So phase 1 is very early perimenopause. This is when cycles are still regular and the ovaries are gradually producing less and less estrogen. Phase 2, so this is early perimenopause transition. So this is when cycles start to become irregular. Then there's a late perimenopause transition. So this is the first cycle of more than 60 days. And then late menopause, which is 12 months from your final period. And then that would transition you into the life phase that is menopause, which is that year on mark. So what does menopause mean? So as a woman progresses through menopause, lower estrogen and progesterone can cause metabolic changes and weight gain in the midsection. When estrogen falls, we lose the anabolic or muscle building properties of estradiol, which means a potential loss of muscle mass, which will decrease your BMR. I have a few other presentations that I've done. I highly recommend everyone looks back on them. So I have an intro to nutrition. So I talk about the total daily energy expenditure and how your BMR contributes to that. So I highly recommend going back and watching that intro to nutrition talk. I also have one about fueling for your workouts and the different energy systems and what those nutritional demands look like. So I won't go into the full detail on BMR, but just understand that your BMR is basically the base metabolic rate. So what it costs your body to maintain muscle mass, function, like cause for your brain to function, and for all detox pathways and organs to function. So that is like minimal calories that you would need to consume to exist doing nothing. So like if you are consuming less than your BMR, you need to be eating more. I guess that's the bottom line on that one without me going into too many details. A woman is also losing the anti-inflammatory metabolism stimulating properties of estrogen and progesterone, leading to a more insulin resistant environment. Insulin resistance is when someone has chronically elevated insulin levels. Insulin is the hormone that stimulates the cells to take up glucose, which is an energy form in the form of carbs. This can lead to prediabetes and then into diabetes potentially. So common causes of inflammation that can worsen during perimenopause are things like alcohol consumption, the consumption of processed foods and that are high sugar, lack of sleep, under recovering, digestive issues, gut issues, health issues, emotional issues. I was actually watching a presentation today in regards to cortisol and how sleep deprivation can basically accumulate inflammation. They did a study and they subjected someone to like 80 hours of sleep deprivation, and they took inflammatory markers on basically an hourly basis. And they watched the inflammation start to accumulate as that person was basically made to stay awake. So for anyone that's not sleeping, please sleep. And if you're struggling with sleep, reach out. All right. During the perimenopause transition, a woman may first experience symptoms of decreasing estrogen while still having normal cycles. As she transitions into phase 2, cycles will become irregular and she'll start to experience the effects of lower levels of progesterone. Remember, ovulation is the primary source of progesterone. So if ovulation is becoming intermittent or stopping altogether, a woman is not going to experience that feel-good feeling of that progesterone rise. Losing progesterone changes the brain and the nervous system's ability to handle stress. This can increase migraine frequency, anxiety, depression, memory loss, and sleep disruptions. Chronic stress can stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, leading to more hot flashes, heavier periods, mood, and sleep issues. So it can also worsen insulin resistance and cause more menopausal weight gain. All right, so what can we do? We can reduce inflammation. So I have a program, and reducing inflammation is one of the primary things that we focus on in it, reducing inflammation, resetting insulin sensitivity, and supporting any sort of like water retention that maybe occurred because of a high stress environment on the adrenals. So reducing inflammation, we can consume foods and practice activities that help to manage inflammation. We can balance blood sugars. So eating a glycemically balanced meal every 2 to 4 hours. So this would be a meal that consists of protein, carbs, fats, and fibers. I will say I see a lot of people that do not consume enough protein and consume far too many carbs. And when I say carbs, I'm not demonizing carbs, because I think that even pizza carbs and pastry carbs all have a place in your diet. But what I'm looking at is what percentage of your total diet maybe those foods are making up. So carbs come from fruits and veggies, as well as bread and pasta and pastries and whatnot. So when I'm talking about carbs, I'm talking about healthy carbs being majority of what you're consuming. So think about, that 80-20, 90-10 lifestyle. So if 80-90% of what you eat and what you do aligns with your goals, and 10 to 20% is like fun foods and happy hours and whatnot, like you're going to be okay. But it's when that percentage starts to become like a 50-40 or 40-60 or, yeah, you know what I mean. So I'm all about balance, but just understand if you are experiencing things like irregularities in blood sugar regulation in a more insulin resistant environment, then it's going to be important for you to balance the glycemic load of your meals and basically make that a priority. And it doesn't have to be something where you track your food forever or, keep a journal, but you do need to create some sort of awareness, because through awareness is how we create change. And if we're just kind of wandering through life and we don't know what foods are triggering what, or, what days we feel good and what days we feel bad, and, we can't make change without some sort of data to base it off of. So I am very much about like track your food, track your cycle, like track your symptoms. Like, are these things occurring in a cyclical manner or not? So balancing your blood sugars, basically looking for protein, carbs, fats, and fibers in all of your meals, eating every 2 to 4 hours to maintain blood sugar stability. And I'm going to talk about that in, I think, the next slide or two. Support your body with nutrition. So avoid foods that can worsen the effects of insulin resistance and inflammation. So inflammation could cause insulin resistance. Insulin resistance could cause more inflammation. So in the flush program that I have, basically we work to manage the inflammation first, so we can address whether insulin resistance is still present or whether the insulin resistance was causing the inflammation or vice versa. So increase nutrient dense foods that support the gut microbiome and hormonal production. So the more variety that you can get in, the more colors of fruits and veggies that you can get in, the different varieties of fiber basically feed the different good gut bugs. So the more variety in there that you can get in your food, the more variety of gut microbiome you can create inside your body, which means the more nutrients your body can absorb. Seed cycling. So pumpkin seed and flax seed during the first half of the cycle or during the first 14 days, or if we're following the moon cycle, then basically new moon would be day 1 and full moon would be day 15. So you would do new moon would be pumpkin seed to flax seed to full moon, and then full moon to next new moon would be sesame seed to sunflower seed. Don't cut carbs. So your thyroid needs a minimum of about 120 grams of carbs. So don't cut your carbs because you might be doing some damage to your thyroid's ability to function. Plus, carbs are where you get your fibers. That's your fruits and vegetables. So if you're reducing your carbs, you're reducing your ability to get fiber. And you should probably be getting between 20 to 30 grams of fiber in a day, if not more. Support your body with appropriate activity. So I prefer a cyclical approach. So I do it with my nutrition. I cycle my macros like that. So macros being protein, carbs, and fats. And then I also cycle my activity to support that as well. So I've got my seed cycling, my fitness plan, and my nutrition plan that basically work on a cyclical basis. All right, the importance of balancing blood sugars. So this is why we don't skip meals. So as I said, we want to balance the glycemic load of your meals. So protein, carbs, fats, and fibers. Blood sugar stability refers to how certain foods affect insulin and blood sugar levels. So eating a balanced meal every 2, 3, 4 hours. 4 hours is like the most I like to push it because then I get really hangry. Don't skip meals or practice long periods of fasting. You get a variety of fiber. The more variety you get, the more biodiversity you can create within your gut. So that supports detox pathways and nutrient absorption. Eat a large chunk of your carbs around your workouts because that is when your body is most receptive to the uptake of glucose. If you are struggling with glucose uptake or think you're dealing with some form of insulin resistance, 1, reach out. 2, there's a great supplement called GDA Max. So it's a glucose disposal agent. So it helps to teach the body to facilitate that uptake of glucose into the muscles. So we want to be in this middle range. This is why we want to eat meals every 2 to 4 hours, because we want to keep our body in a place where it doesn't feel any sort of glycemic stress. So we want the body to feel comfortable releasing fat, protecting lean muscle mass, reducing cravings, and having sustained energy throughout the day. So when we say skip meals or restrict calories or carbs, or exercise on an empty stomach, so people on their morning cardio, we see blood sugar drops. When we see frequent or chronic blood sugar drops, the body burns muscle and holds onto fat. Energy crashes and we see more cravings start to occur. Now, if we're continually, say, grazing all day, so say you're one of those people that's like always eating something because you're maybe always on the go, then we're going to see blood sugars basically staying in that top part. So we're going to see more body fat storage, or the body stores more fat. So we want to be in this midpoint. A little thing or a little note on metabolic adaptations, which is something that I talked about in my intro to nutrition talk. So metabolic adaptations are things like when we don't eat enough food. So the body essentially goes into a power save mode. So if we think about our bodies kind of like our phone, when your phone gets to 20% and it asks you if you want to go into a power save mode and you're like, yeah, I want you to live forever, Well, that's kind of similar to what your body does. Like you hit that power save mode and your bot or your phone's going to, dim screen light. It's going to offload apps that you're not using that are not a priority. So your body basically does the same thing. But what your body does in that low calorie, low energy state is it's going to offload things that are expensive to it, like muscle mass. And it's going to store things that are free for it, like body fat. It's going to downregulate hormones or things that are costly for it. So reproductive hormones are top of the list of things that are not a priority at that point in time. So putting ourselves under more stress, burning the candle at both ends is a way to, I mean, for some people, I've seen some athletes where it actually puts them into almost an early menopause. So a lot of, I mean, I can think about when I was struggling with my hormones and I didn't understand enough about hormones at that point in time to know why I was waking up drenched in sweat and basically needing a towel because I was having night sweats. And I didn't know that my sleep issues were associated with hormones. And like what I know now is that I was basically experiencing perimenopause symptoms in my early mid 30s. And it wasn't because I was going through perimenopause and it wasn't because I was, getting closer to menopause. It was because I was subjecting my body to so much stress. So, biggest takeaway here, take care of your body, listening to your body. Strength training. So as we get older, as we lose that estrogen, our bones become less dense. Like we start to lose some of that bone density. So a great way to naturally increase bone density is by lifting heavy weights. I say heavy weights in quotes because that's relative to anyone. Like something that, is heavy for me might kill someone else. Like, don't do it. So, or someone that's like starting out, like, the barbell might be heavy for them. And that's heavy. And that is causing a rate of perceived exertion at that, 7, 8, 9 mark, with if we're assuming like a 10 scale. I should have been more specific about that. But that output is relative to that person as far as what heavy looks like. So I encourage people to lift heavy often and early. Like consider strength training, like, investing in your stocks, like for retirement, because at some point, like right now, when you're younger, when you're like ambitious, when you have all the energy and you want to go do all the things, put on that muscle mass. That's going to increase your BMR. It's going to help with blood sugar stability because the more muscle you have, the more little basically parking garages that glucose can be taken up into. The higher your BMR is, so that base metabolic rate. So the more muscle you have, that means like when you're sitting by the pool on vacation, you don't have to be so worried about, oh my gosh, I need to go to the gym. So strength training, super important. Following a progressive overload program or some sort of cycle-based training is a great way to get after it. Try not to do too much high intensity, especially at this point in time. I definitely will do higher intensity during the first 2 weeks of my cycle, and then I start to kind of taper it down. And then I essentially have a deload week for the last week of my cycle. Yoga and mobility are huge for basically taking the body out of that fight or flight response. I also implement nasal breathing for some of my clients as well, because there's a lot of information coming out about diaphragmatic breathing and how it tickles the vagus nerve, which is a nerve that runs from your gut to your brain. So kind of that literal gut-brain connection. And it's been shown to have some basically relaxation type effects on the body when used properly. All right, lifestyle things. So walk more. So if you want a great way to help to balance your blood sugar and kind of if you feel some sort of like energy crash in the afternoon or after a meal, go for a walk. Walking is a great way to increase calorie burn without increasing stress. So that non-exercise activity. It also helps to support blood sugar stability. Sleep. So create a good sleep routine. Like circadian problems or sleep problems are a common area of inflammation. So as I said, like sleep deprivation can increase inflammatory markers over a period of time. Address sources of stress in your environment. So if it's like, you know, I'm going to use coffee. If it's coffee on an empty stomach, like, and you're spiking your cortisol in the morning, like that could be a stressor. Coffee and its acidity, it can actually affect the gut microbiome. So you can actually be throwing your blood sugar regulation off for the day with having coffee on an empty stomach. Like not sleeping, that can be one. Like having some sort of gut issues, like say you're constipated. Like if you're constipated, like that's a sign that your body can eliminate toxins the way it should be able to. If you're having diarrhea all the time, like that's on the other end. Like that's also a sign that your body is likely experiencing some malabsorption of food. Or there might be some sort of intestinal issue like leaky gut or SIBO or H. pylori that could be going on, that maybe we need to look into something like that, because all of those things can cause issues with your hormones outside of just where you are in life. All right, as I said, calming the body's inflammation. So higher levels of inflammation can cause insulin resistance. Insulin resistance can also cause higher levels of inflammation. Addressing gut issues that could be hindering the body's ability to detox and absorb nutrients. Support the adrenals to support the removal of any excess aldosterone, which is a water retention hormone that could have built up over time due to high levels of stress. And then addressing potential downregulation of thyroid function. All right, heavy periods is something that I commonly see people struggle with, especially with that perimenopause transition. So things you can do to help to support this would be things like reducing alcohol. So consuming alcohol basically increases your exposure to estrogen by impairing your liver's ability to metabolize it. More estrogen means heavier periods. So I want to touch on alcohol again. Once again, I highly recommend watching my intro to nutrition talk, because I talk about alcohol in there, but I'll kind of do a quick rundown on alcohol and why we need to be aware of it. Alcohol can also increase insulin resistance. It can hinder your ability to get into those deeper restorative sleep cycles. When we consume alcohol, it also has an effect on the gut microbiome. So alcohol kills things. So if it's killing things in your gut, it's going to kill the good and some of the bad. But the problem is the bad can colonize quicker than the good. So it can, like alcohol consumption for a long duration of time can affect your body's ability to absorb nutrients and your overall gut microbiome. So think about alcohol this way. If your liver has a conveyor belt and all your macros have to come through here and you have alcohol, the door shuts and everything else piles up on the outside, waiting for that toxin that is alcohol to be processed by the liver. Now, nothing else can occur basically until the toxin is removed. So that means everything else is set on backup. So that means things like estrogen metabolites that should go through the liver to be removed so that they don't create things like estrogen dominance or basically those heavier cycles that could occur, weight gain, etc. Basically, those get recirculated into your body. So anything that is set for removal that isn't like going to wait is going to get recirculated. So we don't want to consume alcohol all the time. Now, I'm not saying not to do it, like you do it, but also like pay attention to how your body is responding when you do it. Like you might think that you fell asleep quicker, it is a depressant, but the truth is you probably didn't get any sort of restorative sleep during the night. I wear a Aura ring. So the Aura ring tracks my sleep. It tracks my respiratory rate, my resting heart rate. It actually tracks my temperature too. So when it comes to tracking my cycle, I can actually see when my temperature changes to signal whether or not I've ovulated. And then I watch to see what kind of like cervical mucosa looks like during that time to see if it looks like fertile mucosa. And then if those things kind of coincide with each other, then I basically know that I ovulated. Now, other things that occur during the luteal phase that this ring helps me see is my resting heart rate and my respiratory rate. Now, if you were to consume alcohol, it might look like you're doing cardio overnight because your body is basically on alert as it's trying to remove that toxin. So it's working extra hard. So you don't get down to that lower resting heart rate that signals that you've achieved recovery. Okay, that was a little side note. Now, back to what we were talking about. So maintain healthy gut bacteria. Healthy gut bacteria escorts estrogen safely out of the body. Eat phytoestrogens. So they shelter you from estrogen by blocking estrogen receptors and promoting healthy metabolism of estrogen. So foods that contain that are things like flax seeds and soybeans and tofu. Correct insulin resistance. So this is something that we can see on lab work, like A1C, fasting blood glucose, and insulin are going to be things that you want to get on lab work if you want to know kind of what that situation looks like. So insulin resistance increases the risk of heavier periods. Elevated insulin directly thickens the uterine lining and can impair ovulation, causing low progesterone. All right. So here is my information. I'm going to leave this up for a second. And anybody with questions, anybody want to chime in with some questions? Everybody understands this completely. I did a really good job. Is that what I'm?
No, it's been very, very helpful.
Good.
I've learned a lot from it just because I just like in the last year started, well, since I got my blood work of knowing that I'm starting into that. So it's really good to know everything of what I'm going to go through.
Yeah.
You
And the
know,
thing is, like, if you start supporting your hormones, like that transition can be so much easier.
yeah. I
So,
just want to screenshot the information.
absolutely. Anybody else with any questions? Looks like there's none.
Oops.
Amazing. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for coming.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Carol,
Oh,
how are you?
sorry. Good, good. Thank you. This was really interesting and helpful. I have never heard about the like lunar cycle as it pertains to our cycle because I've never heard it, and I'm really interested in it because I had a hysterectomy in 2017, and so there's nothing really for me to relate to in terms of flows at this point. And so I'm wondering where my body is at. So I'll be looking at some of that stuff more closely.
Yeah, good. Good. Glad it's been very helpful. And I will send you guys all the replay. So if you guys hit that you were interested or coming to this in the Facebook invite, basically I'll send everyone that. If you want to be on my email list, just shoot me your email address and I'll throw you on my list. I promise I don't send things out every day. I try to only send things out when it's important, so I won't blow up your inbox.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, anybody else with any other questions?
No, but it was very interesting. I too had not heard of the lunar and using the seeds. Of course, I'm extremely postmenopausal. But it's a really good thing to understand what these different hormones do. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Share it with a friend. Because I will say this, like, as I've gotten into this, I think looking at it, I just feel like I was gypped as a kid, where, as a kid, you're kind of taught to whisper about your cycle, and, it's something that you need to be embarrassed about. And, I mean, I, I remember multiple times, getting my period and, like having to go and whisper to someone like, hey, do you have a tampon? And, you know, I, I just, I want more for kids these days. I want them to like be comfortable. Like I've got some teen clients that I work with, and it's it's so great to watch like their skin clear up, and they don't like complain about like these terrible cycles, and they're just so surprised. They're like, yeah, it just showed up, and I feel good. And it's yeah, I just feel like I was gypped as a child, and I want to be able to share that information with everyone. And I think women they deserve that information. And also just knowing you can't get pregnant every day of your cycle. I think that that's important to know, because
Yeah.
heck, man, I was terrified like every day.
Yeah.
So knowing things like that, I
I
think
do have a question in the research that you've read about how much our experience going through perimenopause and menopause is related to what our mothers experienced. I don't know that there is a relationship.
Mhm.
Um,
So what I've read is when you go, like, you can tell a lot about when you might go into perimenopause and menopause based off of your mother. So that is kind of the extent that I've seen that. I haven't seen much in regards to like grandmother, mother, like kind of that connection, but I've seen a lot of like, if you're curious, ask your mother when she went into menopause, because that'll give you a little insight as to what yours might look like.
yeah, I think it would have been great to be able to have these kind of conversations generations ago, because my mom is not able to tell me, oh yeah, I went into menopause around this age.
Yeah.
She barely remembers anything that is, useful to my health.
Yes.
Or like my mom had her hysterectomy at 40. And in my opinion, she was menopausal for 40 years of our life. She never had control of her, anger and all of that. So
Uh-huh. Well, like there's so much more information. So I'll do another presentation probably in a week or so about like period problems and how to know if it's estrogen or progesterone. Um, so there's so much more out there now about, hey, like if you're experiencing heavy cycles, if you're experiencing migraines, it could be associated with estrogen levels. But then there's also like understanding, is it a estrogen dominance that's a frank estrogen dominance versus a relative? So a relative estrogen dominance would mean something like maybe you're not having a strong ovulation, so your progesterone is low. So even though your estrogen might be at a normal level, your estrogen is dominant relative to a low level of progesterone. So there's that estrogen dominance, or there's the estrogen dominance where we see, as I kind of talked about, like if you drink too much alcohol, like you might see estrogen recirculating. So now you have an elevated above normal estrogen dominance, and your progesterone is at its normal level. So even just understanding how lifestyle factors may contribute to that, and how to identify things like that. Because there's even equations on lab work that if I know what your estrogen is and your progesterone are during basically that mid-luteal phase, I can understand how much estrogen dominance you might be experiencing. So I'll do that presentation probably a week or so. But it's just also fascinating.
Thank you,
Sure,
Jen. I
there's-
really
yeah.
appreciate you inviting us today.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thanks
you.
for coming. Yeah, any other questions before I kind of end this meeting? No?
No,
I'm
Okay.
good.
Good.
I appreciate you all. Thanks for coming.
You too. Thanks, Jen.
Absolutely. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Too.
thank
Bye.
you.